we should have started a decade ago,
Oh,
because that's when the first warnings were sounding. And this is not a new message. This is not something that has come out of the blue, that has suddenly been dreamt up by Mark Rutte for this Chatham House speech today. In fact, it's a message that's been steadily building and steadily becoming more urgent for years already. It's just that most Western European nations, including the UK, have successfully ignored it for this long.
the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has warned that Russia could be ready to use military force against the organisation within 5 years. And he's called for Western allies to invest more in their armed forces. Much more in the case of the UK as it happens. Sir Keir Starmer has yet to absolutely confirm that the UK will spend 3% on defence by 2034. Mark Rutte said he expected NATO allies to agree to spend 5% of their national income on defence when they meet at a summit in the Netherlands next week. He made his comments during a speech at Chatham House earlier this afternoon.
If we want to keep our societies safe, and look, if you do not do this, if we would not go to the 5%, including the 3.5% core defense spending, you could still have the National Health Service, or in other countries their health systems, the pension system, etc. But you'd better learn to speak Russian.
Joining us now is Keir Giles, Senior Consulting Fellow at Chatham House and a former RAF pilot. Keir Giles, thanks for joining us this evening. Those words from Mark Rutte, I mean, essentially he's telling us that NATO needs to brace itself for an attack on a member by 2030, even down to telling us that if we don't up our defences, then we'll all need to start learning Russian. What do you make of that?
Well, the choice of 5 years out is a curious one, because most estimates that we're hearing now are actually quite a bit less than that. The time that it's been estimated that Russia will take to be ready to attack a NATO nation has been gradually coming down. 5 years was the average about this time last year. Since then, the minimum estimate that we've heard was from the Danish Defence Intelligence Service, which said 6 months. So in a way, Mark Rutte is being quite conservative. But the message, of course, remains exactly the same, that countries across NATO, not just in the frontline states, but here in the UK as well, have to step up their defence spending. Otherwise, all of those other things that they are spending their money on, that he mentioned, like pensions, like welfare, might just become irrelevant.
Well, Russia, of course, is at war and is operating at 4 times the speed of other NATO countries in the way that it develops technology. Do you think that really the impetus is needed now to almost act as if we are at war now? You're saying that 5 years off is too far off. Should we start now, just considering that we are at war?
Well, not really. We should have started a decade ago, because that's when the first warnings were sounding. And this is not a new message. This is not something that has come out of the blue, that has suddenly been dreamt up by Mark Rutte for this Chatham House speech today. In fact, it's a message that's been steadily building and steadily becoming more urgent for years already. It's just that most Western European nations, including the UK, have successfully ignored it for this long.
The reality, though, 32 NATO members, he's basically asking them to commit to spending, 3.5% on hard defence and 1.5% on broader security areas, things like cyber. Is that really feasible?
Well, the straightforward choice that he's laying out is be prepared to defend yourself or simply not be able to. And of course, more has to be spent now after so many years, in fact, decades have been spent running down the armed forces and also all of those other elements that keep our society safe. All the other things he's referring to with that additional 1.5% of spending, things like civilian infrastructure for simply moving military forces to where they need to be. Critical infrastructure, the things that keep people alive, ports, transport, all of that other stuff that's essential to keeping a country running, which has also been neglected and allowed to stagnate at the same time as the armed forces have been run down. So it's really just another call to be ready for the challenge that is actually coming from Russia.
Do you think Donald Trump deserves some credit for pushing this issue? Perhaps NATO countries were comfortable in their naivety, if we put it like that. He has brought it home that there may not necessarily be American backup, and that, he's certainly prompted some people to say that America is an unreliable ally. Do you think that?
Well, Donald Trump isn't the first US president or the first US senior figure to try to shake Europe into taking an interest in providing.
He's not, but he seems to have had more impact, doesn't he?
There seems to have been more of a repeated sense of panic among European leaders with the arrival of Trump because finally they think the United States might actually mean it. So, yes, in a way, this has caused a certain amount of movement towards taking the problem seriously, but still not enough. And you can tell how it's not enough by the way this repeated panic comes through every time the issue comes up, whether it is with Donald Trump's election or then with his inauguration or then with the comments by Pete Hegseth in February when he was laying it on the line for NATO. Again and again, there's this sense of shock and rediscovery of the problem because nothing's been done about it in between.
Keir, do you think these warnings cut through with the public? How much support is there for big defence spending when there are so many other demands on government budgets?
Well, sadly, at the moment, we have a government that finds national defence an extremely uncomfortable topic to deal with. We heard this Labour government saying for so many months after it came into power that there is no money, which, of course, is completely untrue. There's plenty of money. There's just conscious decisions being taken to spend it on other stuff. But overall, across more countries than the UK and across more governments than the current one, there has been a failure to explain to publics just what is at stake and just what it means if all of the rights and freedoms that we take for granted in this country and across the west of Europe are actually challenged in the same way that we've seen Russia challenge Ukraine.
But it sounds as if you're saying that the governments need to do an even better selling job on this to convince the public that these spends on defence are absolutely necessary.
Absolutely. And not so much do a better job, but actually start doing the job in the first place, because that's a message that really has not been delivered by the current government. And you look across Europe and you see the countries that are taking it seriously and that are preparing themselves for the problem. But of course, they are the ones which are closest to it geographically.
You're talking about the Scandinavia, Finland, Sweden.
Poland, the Baltic states. But one of the key things that Mark Rutte was trying to get across in his speech today is that there isn't anymore a front line and safe areas behind it. He's saying there is no east and west because with these new Russian weapon systems that they've designed to strike at ranges of thousands of kilometers, everywhere is within range, everywhere is the front line. And that, of course, includes this country, the UK.
Keir Giles, thanks very much for joining us this evening. Keir Giles there, Senior Consulting Fellow at Chatham House.